Hi everyone, this is Team Boom Shaka Laka with a presentation for you on improving patient wait times. I'm Renalyn and I'll be your first presenter, following Jeffrey Nguyen and Samuel Gomez to conclude. We hope you enjoy our presentation. So, the issue my team and I will be presenting to you is that patients wait too long to see their doctors. As you can see from this graph, the average wait time for a patient to see their doctor is about 20 minutes, resulting in nearly 2 out of every 5 patients who are frustrated with their doctors before their checkup even starts. Unhappy patients have the possibility of creating unhappy doctors, which could therefore result in some unintentional, insufficient work by the doctors. Additionally, the failure for a clinic to improve upon their patient waiting times will result in the inability for the clinic to retain, satisfy, and attract patients to the clinic. In my next slide, I'll be sharing some of the highly effective methods for a clinic to use when attempting to improve their patient waiting times. So, some of the methods to improve patient wait times include the following. The first being collecting basic patient info in advance of the appointment. Using this method saves time immensely, considering some patients take longer than others to fill out their patient paperwork. Second, separating duties associated with the office phone from patient check-ins. Using this method saves the clinic from a backlog of waiting patients created by too many check-ins and not enough prep completed by the office personnel. Third, changing the method of appointment reminders from phone calls to text messaging. In the past, people have said that making phone calls to patients for an appointment reminder is seen as more personable. However, studies have shown that patients actually prefer to be texted instead. Using this method allows providers a written record for the clinic that the patient was reminded of their appointment. Fourth, encouraging clients to use the patient portal or the Q app associated with the clinic. With patient portal, patients can fill out their own paperwork, access updates, submit their insurance information, and more, all from the comfort of their own home. With the Q apps, the patient is able to tell how long they must wait for their appointment, allowing them to assess if they can run errands, catch up on some work, go for a coffee run, something like that in the time that they must wait for their appointment. And last but not least, implementing a pull system within the clinic. With the pull system, the employees working in the back of the clinic will be helping those in the front clinic. This is done by creating a signal to every employee that a regularly used item should be reordered for the clinic soon. Doing this helps reduce down patient waiting time in the long run. And now we will have Jeffrey Nguyen give you all a presentation on DMAIC. Thank you for watching my part of the presentation.
In order to improve patient wait times, our group has elected to adopt the Six Sigma model of define, measure, analyze, improve, and control, otherwise known as DMAIC. DMAIC is the method used to recognize and to fix a problem. In the define section, we create a problem statement based on an observation or trend that is being experienced. For us, that trend and that problem is that the problem is that patients are experiencing too high waiting times. As Renalyn mentioned before, patient waiting times that are too high creates risk in losing patients. Aside from defining the problem in this phase, another thing you could do is define who the customers are in this situation. It would be the patients, and who the sponsors are. And in this case, it would be the front end staff, the office manager, and the project manager as well. Next is the measure section. In measure, we need to gather data, specifically baseline data. Baseline data is basically a set of data that is created at the start of the Six Sigma process. The data will then be contrasted with new data that will be gathered in the improve section. And the point of this is to give insight to project members, managers, about whether or not the improve section is working efficiently. This data is used as a base of reference, hence the name baseline. And the data is gathered in a number of ways, but in our scenario, we decided to go with the observational route. Also in measure, you get a good notion of how severe the problem is, magnitude. In a real world scenario, we would have went to a healthcare setting to observe how long patient waiting times are. Unfortunately, we couldn't, so we created a projected chart just to show how the baseline data would look like. In our hypothetical scenario, we would have went to a clinic each day of the week and calculated the average waiting time. And in this chart right here, you can see that the average waiting time tends to peak around the 20-minute mark across the board. In the analysis section, the team would reflect on the data gathered and measured and try to identify the root cause. What causes the problem? In our real-world scenario, we considered variables such as failure to have insurance on hand, not registering on time, or checking in beforehand, or not even having the proper paperwork filed out. A root cause analysis takes a close look at the core causes of the problems, and a team takes countermeasures to address the issue. In our hypothetical scenario, we recognize the root cause as patients not being prepared beforehand, but also we're not being prepared. Nowadays, patients can use patient portals and their mobile devices to do a majority of the paperwork and patient information beforehand. But for us, we would also like to implement a pull system to help load balance the workload between the front end and back end staff. And we'd like to consolidate all the tasks in the front end into one employee each, so everyone specializes in one thing, creating more bandwidth for more employees in the front end to adhere to patients. In this section, analysis, it's strictly hypothesis only. All the team members should reflect on the data and only think about what could be causing the problem. At no point during this process should any team member be going out trying to solve the problem, because that can mess with the data and interfere with future plans. In the improve section, we decided to focus on two things: getting our office ramped up in the front end by specializing in front end tasks such as appointments, phone calls, collections, and implementing a pull system so other staff members can come in and help other front end staff, so it creates more bandwidth, as well as educating patients on submitting basic info via their mobile app and checking in beforehand. After implementing all of this in our hypothetical scenario, we needed to verify whether or not these improvements were having a positive effect. And in order to do that, we need to use observational data once again. So we would go out once a day and average the patient waiting time, and we would compare it to our baseline data in measure as presented in these two charts. In an ideal scenario, our patient waiting times should have gone down, and in this chart you can see, as an example, it went down and averages below 15 minutes. So in our hypothetical scenario, it went down 5 whole minutes. Finally, as we get into the last phase of control, we focus on how to sustain these improvements. Remember, we focus on solutions in a relatively short period of time, specifically observations made in a 1 to 2 week span. However, there's no way to really verify if this method will work long term. Because of this, we need to create contingencies in order to resolve any problems that might come out in the future. In this phase, the team asks themselves, how can we sustain the changes that we've made so far? For starters, we can have the older folk onboard newer folk about how the office is ran, so the changes in the front end and how they operate can become more standardized and streamlined quicker. Next, we can focus on creating schedules so no one person is in charge of a certain front end task for too long. This creates diversity in the office work. In regards to patient education, we can promote one person to be in charge of creating easy-to-follow guides on how to download mobile apps and how to operate them, so that in the future, it allows them to submit information ahead of time. Contingencies are created when things start to hit the fan again. In this case, our problem would be waiting times that are escalating to be too long. They're put into place to make sure that in the short term, the times aren't peaking highly. In our scenario, contingencies can be two employees splitting the job of one office task between them so they can complete it quicker to help patients more. This can come in the form of deadlines that are coming up and it is taking up the attention of the front end staff, or vice versa, where we create bandwidth by consolidating smaller tasks to one person, freeing up the number of bodies that can help patients. Finally, we will transition to Sam, who will finish this presentation.
Thanks, Jeff. Hi, everyone. Today, I'll be talking about reduction of waste. But first, let me explain to you what waste is. Waste, or better known as MUDA, is one of the 7 wastes in lean manufacturing. Waste is an activity that does not produce value to a process. Waste in waiting is the idle time that is produced when 2 processes are not in sync with each other, or interruption of workflow. Some of these causes of waste in waiting are inefficient patient registration, insufficient staffing, room availability, and technology issues. In order to reduce waste and improve waiting time, there are certain processes that need to be corrected or paid attention to. One area would be in registration, or the front desk. Front desk needs to be trained or retrained in a way to make patient check-in quicker and more accurate. Also, the front desk should be appropriately staffed, and that staff should be dedicated. So there should be staff that is dedicated to scheduling, some that is dedicated to checking in patients, some that is dedicated to making phone calls, and so on. But they should all be trained in a way to fill in for each other when one is absent. Front desk can also let patients know that they can pre-register via phone or online portals, and offer them telehealth appointments as well. They can also reiterate that there is a no-show and late arrival policy. Another area to look into would be into staffing. Staffing medical assistants and registered nurses appropriately. Analyzing clinical data can show which days and times are the busiest, and that information can be used to staff accordingly. Also, move idle assistants to help in areas where a bottleneck is beginning to form. Another area would be into room availability. Use idle rooms. Some providers are slower than others, therefore there are idle rooms available. Take advantage of the resources. If there is no rooms available and the schedule is behind, take the patient back to the lab chair or the patient's scale room, take their vitals, and then return them to the waiting room. This will help the patient feel like they haven't been waiting such a long time, and it will give a head start to the provider as well. And lastly, technology issues. IT staff should consider arriving to work before the workday begins. This will help get a head start on correcting any technological issues before the patient begins to arrive. After implementing these changes, increased patient satisfaction would be the first obvious benefit of reducing waste. Less waiting time gives the perception that everything is flowing well. It means that the quality of care and the time for patient-provider interaction is not being affected. Another benefit would be improved staff productivity because the processes flow better. There are no areas where some staff are idle and other areas where staff are overwhelmed. And lastly, the benefit would reduce costs because time and resources are being utilized appropriately. Thanks for watching.